All right. So, you've been digging into the UK construction industry, and, well, frankly, it feels like someone hit the panic button over there.
Yeah.
Collapses, cost overruns, massive projects just dead in the water. Where do we even begin?
It's a real mess, isn't it?
Yeah.
And sadly, the dominoes are still falling.
Yeah.
Take the Buckingham Group collapse, that 300 million supply chain debt. That's not, rounding error. That's a hammer blow to tons of these smaller businesses.
Okay. See, this is where I get tripped up. Like 300 million, that's a number I can't even fathom.
Yeah.
Break that down for me. What does that look like on the ground for these smaller players?
Imagine, like a small family-run plumbing supplier.
You're right.
They've poured their heart and soul into this business, maybe even inherited it.
Sure.
They delivered on time, met every requirement, or, on a Buckingham project, and now they're staring down the barrel of tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of pounds owed.
Mm.
Money they were planning on using to make payroll or invest in new equipment or just, to keep the lights on.
Right. And from what I'm reading, it sounds like those administrators, Grant Thornton, aren't exactly giving anyone a lot of hope when it comes to getting any of that money back.
No, you're right. Administrators come in, and essentially their job is to pick through the wreckage and see if anything can be salvaged at all.
Right.
And right now, with administration fees alone already topping £5 million, it's looking more and more likely that those suppliers, those subcontractors, they're going to be left holding the bag.
So not only are these businesses grappling with the initial blow of not getting paid for work they already did,
Right.
but now you're telling me they also have to watch these administration fees pile up, which is basically eating away at what little scraps might have been left over for them anyway.
Exactly. And it creates this awful ripple effect because it's not even just about the immediate debts. It's about the contracts that are now lost, the projects that are halted, the inability of these businesses to then pay their suppliers down the line.
Right.
We're talking about potentially forcing healthy, totally viable businesses into bankruptcy because they had the bad luck of working with a firm that went under.
And if we thought Buckingham Group was bad, then the news coming out of ISG is like throwing fuel on the fire, right?
Absolutely. ISG is a huge player in this industry. And the fact that their administrators are already saying, like, straight up, there's probably no money for creditors, that's a big
Yeah,
deal.
yeah.
This isn't some, isolated incident. This speaks to some potentially much larger issues in the industry as a whole.
And this is where it stops being about just numbers and spreadsheets, right? And it really starts to hit home.
Yeah.
You mentioned the human impact earlier, but let's really, drive that point home for our listener.
Okay, so imagine this. You're a skilled electrician. You've been contracted on an ISG project for months, putting in long hours,
Hmm.
probably missing time with your family to, hit deadlines.
Yeah.
Then, bam, project stops. You're out of work, and the wages you rightfully earned, gone.
Wow.
That's the reality for a lot of these construction workers right now, and it's really tough.
It really makes you wonder, how does this even happen? Are these collapses just a case of bad luck? Or are we talking about like mismanagement? Or are there even bigger economic things at play here?
That's the million-pound question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer.
Hmm.
The UK construction industry has always had these razor-thin margins, but then you add in stuff like Brexit, all the global supply chain issues, material costs going through the roof.
It's like they're trying to build a house of cards in a windstorm.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And then there's the elephant in the room, interest rates.
Yeah.
Construction, that industry, it relies so much on borrowing money, and these rate hikes, well, they're putting a real strain on even the most established firms out there.
So we've got this like perfect storm brewing here. The economy's shrinking, costs are exploding, and nobody knows what's coming next.
Right.
It's no wonder we're seeing these big companies starting to stumble.
And as we're going to talk about in our next deep dive on Vistri, even those who look like they're weathering the storm, they're not immune to making huge mistakes.
Okay.
And those mistakes, they always have consequences.
So you're saying even the biggest companies aren't safe. Vistri, these guys are like the UK house building company. They announced they're off by 115 million on 9 projects.
Yeah,
Come on, are you serious? How is that even possible?
I know, it's crazy, right? It sounds like, one of those movies about construction gone wrong, haha.
Yeah.
But honestly, this Vistry thing, it just shows that even with all the fancy spreadsheets and algorithms we have these days,
Right.
human error or maybe even some deeper flaws in the way they estimate costs, that can still really mess things up.
So it's not just like forgetting to carry the one here.
No.
We're talking major miscalculation with some pretty big consequences, I'm guessing.
Oh, for sure. First of all, this is a huge hit to Vistri's bottom line. Think profit warnings, share prices in free fall. Oh, yeah. Never a good look for a company that wants investors to trust them.
Of course not. But it's not just about the money, right?
Yep.
What does this mean for projects themselves?
Yeah.
And more importantly, for the people who are depending on these projects.
That's the real problem here. 115 million shortfall. Yeah. That's not just a number in a spreadsheet.
Right.
That's delays, redesigns, maybe even projects getting completely scrapped. Imagine you're a young family. You've put everything you have into a new Vistri home,
Right.
and then suddenly you hear, sorry, but, unforeseen circumstances.
Which is probably code for we messed up the math.
Pretty much.
And, we were just talking about transparency and accountability, and this Vistri thing just feels like a big flashing sign saying, hey, maybe we haven't quite figured that out.
Right. It makes you wonder if a company like Vistri, with all their resources and experience, if they can make a mistake this big, then what about everyone else?
It's kind of scary when you think about it. But before we get too deep into this construction chaos, let's talk about the government's role in all of this. They've been doing some interesting things on the infrastructure side, haven't they?
They have. And it's not even just about, saying yes or no to projects. It's about setting the tone, the priorities for the whole industry. And right now, honestly, nobody seems to know what's going on.
Yeah, like with that Lower Thames Crossing project, that thing's been stuck in limbo for forever. And now, just when it looked like things were finally moving forward, new government comes in, slams on the brakes. Again, what's going on here? Is this normal, or are they trying to tell us something?
It's definitely strange. They say they need more time to, review the project, especially after that spending review. And I mean, it is a $9 billion project. You
Sure.
want to be sure, right?
There's always a but.
Exactly. This government, they've already canceled the Stonehenge Tunnel and the Arundel Bypass.
Yeah.
Both huge projects,
Yeah.
big money involved.
Right.
So it makes you wonder, are they just being careful with money, or is there something else going on?
Are they saying, hey, maybe these mega projects aren't such a good idea after all?
Possibly. Remember, they're all about environmental stuff, saving money, rethinking how we do these big infrastructure projects.
So when they say more time for review, what they could really mean is, hold on, we might not even want to build this thing anymore.
Yeah.
It's like they're sending mixed messages about all this, we need to invest in infrastructure, but also, wait, not so fast, let's rethink this whole building thing.
Yeah, and that uncertainty, that lack of clear direction, that can be really tough on the construction industry.
Right.
I mean, these businesses, they need to plan for the long term. They need to know what's actually getting built so they can get the resources, hire the right people, and just be ready to go.
So it's not even just about the Lower Thames Crossing anymore. It's
Right.
about what this whole thing and this decision, or I guess lack of a decision, what that says to the whole industry.
Exactly.
Talk about shaking confidence.
Yeah, and this is where things get really interesting because you can't separate these government decisions from everything else we've been talking about.
Right.
The financial problems, the projects going over budget, the fact that there aren't enough skilled workers. It all adds to this feeling of like, can this industry even survive the way it is now?
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate for a sec.
Okay.
Maybe this whole shakeup, this moment of truth, maybe it's what UK construction needs.
Maybe.
A chance to hit reset, fix the things that are broken, and come out stronger.
It's possible. You're right. There's definitely an opportunity here. We've been talking about transparency, accountability, being open to new ideas. These aren't just, empty words.
Right.
These are the things you need to build an industry that's strong and ready for the future.
So, if we were to actually grab our tools and start rebuilding, what would that even look like? Where would we start?
Well, I think the biggest thing is focusing on quality over quantity.
Okay.
For too long, it's been all about bigger, faster, cheaper.
Yeah.
And we see how that turns out.
Yeah.
Cutting corners, bad practices, and things just not lasting.
It's like building a house to last for generations versus one that's, held together with duct tape and hope.
Exactly. And we have to talk about how projects actually get started, the procurement process.
Okay.
The way it works now, everyone's trying to offer the lowest price, which means contractors have to cut corners and sacrifice quality just to stay in business.
Which is how we end up with those crazy headlines about buildings collapsing, projects getting delayed, and, 115 Miller accounting errors.
Exactly.
Huh.
So we need to rethink the whole system, support companies that use ethical materials, and create a system that actually rewards quality and sustainability.
Right.
Those are all key things.
It's like we need to completely change how we think about construction from the very beginning.
Totally. And a big part of that is getting young people excited about construction again.
Yeah.
Because, let's be real, the industry doesn't have the best image. Young people today, they want careers with purpose, where they can be innovative and make a difference. We need to show them that construction can be that kind of career.
It's not just about, laying bricks or pouring concrete. It's about shaping the entire world around us,
Exactly.
building a better, more sustainable future for everyone. It's about more than just buildings. It's about building careers, building communities.
That's a great way to put it.
So it sounds like, yeah, the UK construction industry's got some serious problems, but it's not hopeless. There's a chance here to learn from what's happened, try new technologies, and build a stronger, more sustainable, and honestly, a more ethical future for everyone in the industry.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And that journey, just like any big construction project, it starts with a strong foundation. Knowledge, working together, and everyone agreeing on what a better future looks like.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. Thanks for taking us through all of this. It's clear that what happens next with UK construction is anyone's guess, but it's going to be fascinating to see what happens.
You got it. Always happy to chat about this stuff.
And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has given you a new way of looking at the world around you. Because even when things seem chaotic and uncertain, there's always a chance to build something better.
So, I'll start the show properly in just a moment. Let's have a look. Is it 10 o'clock yet? It's almost 10 o'clock. It must be 10 o'clock. Nearly, very nearly. I will start the show in just a moment, but just while we're doing that, as I've said plenty of times, Jim Turner, Starmer is a communist. He'll pull as much capital, military security out of the country as he can before he's shoved out. He's not bothered about himself. It's all for the greater good of the world of communism, he says. Always deeper than what you're supposed to be seeing. Ain't that the truth? Yeah, ain't that the truth? Turn the volume down. Am I coming through a bit loud? If that's the case, I do apologise. Haven't had a reset recently, so I'm not entirely sure why that is the case. But it is 10 o'clock, so I think it's time to do our usual stuff, starting now. Yeah, good morning properly this time. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Hope you're all well. I am going to go over to the chat because the last question kind of keys us into where we are now. There we are, Dan Cullen saying, good morning, you early? Yes. Well, sort of. We actually started the show about 12 minutes early today, although I wasn't, well, I was here, but I wasn't here, if you know what I mean. Yeah, we tried something new this morning. There's so much going on in the industry right now, and a lot of it is bad. So I thought that I'd try to add a new news headline section to the show. Now, if you missed it, it is effectively an audio format, so I didn't want it to appear in the middle of the existing show because that would break things up. And the end of the show tends to be very busy with chat and catching up on whatever we've been discussing during the show. So I bolted it on at the beginning of the show instead. I realise I already take up enough of your time each day, so I only going to be doing this when there's actually enough newsworthy news to actually share. But listen, I think it's pretty good. Listen, if you choose to stick with the usual 10 o'clock start, fully understand, it's not a problem at all. But as I say, there is so much going on at the moment that it just seemed like a good idea to actually share what was going on. So the news headlines today related to ISG again and to Vinci and to the Lower Thames crossing and various other bits and pieces. If you'd like to catch up, All of that will be available over on YouTube at about 10:30 this morning. Peter McKenna says, no matter what Prime Minister gets in, they all sing from the same hymn sheet. They're governed by higher powers. They are glove puppets of society, the fall guys. Higher powers do something and the Prime Minister gets all the fallout. It's a thankless job, and I wouldn't want it for £1 billion. I wouldn't want it either. Jim Turner says, the AI quality is getting frighteningly real. You have no idea, Jim. Just to fill you in very quickly, in order to produce that show that I did, or that bit that we did at the top of the show, I basically gave the AI website URLs. I handpicked the stories and gave it the URLs, and it went away, deciphered the stories, and came up with a script and delivered it. I think it's fantastic. Peter McKenna says, I enjoyed it, Mark. It was uplifting. Good. Thank you for that, Peter. These things always stand or fall by the feedback that we get from you guys. So thank you very much indeed for that. Steve Williamson is here after his victory in the Mystery Machine yesterday, which we'll get to in just a moment. But there's something else I want to tell you about. Obviously, we've covered one bit of new stuff. I've already shown you the front cover of our Halloween book, Gravedigger, which looks like that. But now I've got something else to show you. I've now nailed down all of the content, most of the content, and the front cover of our third edition of A Sight for Sore Eyes. Yes. Now, for those of you that don't know, A Sight for Sore Eyes is basically a collection of what I consider to be my very best writing from the past year or so. We did the first one immediately after the Didcot disaster back in 2016. Basically to help raise funds for the families of those impacted by the fallout from Didcot. We did the second one about 2 and a bit years ago, I think. And I do promise myself that I will do one every year and then forget. But we do have one coming. That will be basically, I'm going to let the dust settle on our Halloween book first. So A Sight for Sore Eyes will be out in November. So loads of new stuff to look forward to, together with our usual stuff and nonsense. Speaking of which, it is Tuesday, the 8th of October. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition. In today's show, Liebherr and the technological future of mining. We're going back to Las Vegas for a walk among the giants. John Deere realizes site potential. And Caterpillar and the secret of eternal life. Well, almost. I am going to hop over to Instagram. Tanner Brown says, I mean this in a nice way. What does this truly have to do with the demolition industry? Well, a lot of the equipment that we talk about is demolition related. Obviously, I mean, the bit that we started the show with, Tanner Brown, the bit that we started the show with was news on various house builders and various projects here in the UK. Most of the projects here in the UK will begin with demolition. So if construction is suffering, demolition will suffer. As I say, a lot of the equipment and the technology that we talk about here on this show will be relevant to demolition as well. Hope that answers the question. And I know you said I mean this in a nice way. That's the way I've taken it. Not a problem at all. Thank you very much indeed for the question. So, yeah. Today's morning monologue, we are going to be discussing the thousands of construction companies that defaulted upon the government's COVID loan schemes and what that says about the current state of the UK construction sector, which we've kind of covered already, but we'll be covering that in greater depth at the end. But before we get to all of that, I do need to trouble you slightly with, when I can get to the right place, with today's Mystery Machine, which looks, well, I'll show you what it looks like in just a moment. Let's have a look. What do we got here? We've got Jim Turner saying the AI quality is frighteningly real. It is disturbingly real. It does me a favour. So, I'm not losing any sleep over it, but it is scarily real. Ken Hatter has just joined us as well. Mark, why don't you use the song AI like lots of YouTubers are doing at the start of their shows? Because I don't like it. I've tried 4 or 5 different systems. I've tried feeding it already rhyming couplets and stuff like that. I've tried giving it an indication of the type of music that I would want to listen to, and none of it comes out particularly well. So, yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that one. Chris Ford says the danger of AI is it will put us all out of a job, potentially. potentially. Although, as Peter McKenna says, he'll never fully put men out of work, always need man's input in one way or another. Certainly from my point of view, I think, doing what I do for a living, it still needs creativity. And when you think about a lot of what happens in demolition and construction, a lot of it is about problem solving live and in the moment. It's not a case of going back to reprogram systems and stuff. You're faced with an issue, and the way that you overcome it, that's what sets us aside. Dan Cullen says, what about Buckingham unpaid bill that totals shocking 300 million? Yes, indeed. And apparently Austin Wilkinson is in our midst. I can't see him, but apparently he is. Morning, Austin. Good to have you here if you are here, and congratulations. Apparently he took delivery of the UK's, I think it's the 1,000th rotor attachment. I can't actually remember the details. It flashed across my screen. I meant to make a note of it. I didn't, and I apologise. Earl Fallon just joined us over on Instagram as well. So Dan Cullen has already guessed that our mystery machine is the Cat 798. We haven't seen the mystery machine yet, which is a good reminder. I can tell you, Dan, you're a mile off. But this is what the today's mystery machine looks like. There you are. As you can see, most definitely not a Cat 798. Definitely not. Now, the one thing I haven't done, which I do need to do, let me get to the right place because I do have a button for it. There is our question of the day, which I'm about to remind you about. So let me take that off the screen and let me play you this. Yeah, this morning's question comes once again from our friend and resident quizmaster, Mr. Gary Muirhead. His question is this: are you a morning person or are you a night owl? Now, I have to admit, I've been both in my time. Back in my drinking days, I'd happily stay out all night and then stay in bed all day. These days, I'm really up beyond midnight and I do all my best work first thing in the morning, generally before the rest of the house wakes up. So what about you? What are you? Are you a night owl or are you a morning person? Love to hear from you on that. I can tell you we've had a guess on the mystery machine from Garvin over on Instagram. He reckons it could be a Hyundai, should I say. A Hyundai DX65W. It is not, but you're not a million miles away. Jim Turner reckons it. Reckons it could be a Volvo Duck. It is not. Peter McKenna reckons a DX100W from Doosan. It is not one of those. And Ken Hatcher reckons, yeah, give Ken two options and he takes the third. Are you a morning person or are you a night owl? He's a midday person. Cheers for that, Ken. And go back to Tanner Brown. I do enjoy your post, he says, and you're not losing a follower. I'm from the USA and the rules and regulations are slightly different. Yeah, they are. And oddly enough, just to fill you in, I bumped into one of your fellow countrymen, Ricky Webb from East Coast Demolition, while I was over at Conexpo last year. And he was saying to me that he watches our show to find out what the UK does in terms of its equipment choices and its methodologies and everything else. I then reported that back to a couple of UK demolition contractors, and they said, well, funnily enough, we watch YouTube to see what the Americans are up to. So there's a kind of we have a special relationship, the UK and the US, don't we? And there's an interchange of information. So thank you very much indeed for your point there. And Mostly Diggers has now changed his mind. He's going for a Bobcat E57W. It is not. Let me show you a bit more. There you are. I'm guessing that could be a Lugong LT10, not entirely sure. Peter is going for the Hyundai R55W. It's not. And what do we got here? Peter McKenna is going for the Hyundai HW180. You're all getting very, very close, but still no cigar. So let me take that off the screen. And we'll actually get the show started. 25 minutes in, we're going to get the show started. Back after this. I came back from Minexpo last week. bubbling about all of the hardware that I'd seen, all the big trucks, all the big wheel loaders, all the big excavators. But in addition to the hardware, there was a lot of software as well, like this.
In today's mining, success is driven by data. But with the abundance of information, how do you harness its true power? Liebherr IO Mine turns your mining operation into a data-driven powerhouse where every movement generates valuable insights. Captured real-time data provides instant performance metrics. Assistant systems optimize each load, boosting efficiency, reducing over or underloading, and continuously improving your entire operation. Trucks navigate challenging terrain autonomously, connecting to trolley lines for maximum energy efficiency, while advanced guidance systems enhance both safety and productivity. Dozer operators are protected at all times, being able to work fully remote thanks to even more innovative solutions such as teleoperations. Step into the nerve center of your operation, where data transforms into actionable insights. Advanced analytics provide a clear picture of fleet performance, guiding strategies to unlock even more potential and drive efficiency. Liebherr's maintenance solutions maximize machine availability with predictive algorithms and expert support. Real-time remote diagnostics and augmented reality ensure rapid problem-solving, reducing downtime. This is the power of a connected mining ecosystem. With IOMine, step into a future of enhanced efficiency, safety, and profitability. Transform your mining operation today with Liebherr.
Now, I saw that, not in action as such, but I saw that over at Minexpo, and we'll be going back to Minexpo in just a moment, but we do need to revisit our mystery machine because we've had lots of guesses, none of them correct as yet. I tell you what, before we do that, here's a very quick one on our question of the day. Are you a morning person or are you a night owl? Tend to burn the candle at both ends, says Chris Ford. Love early mornings in the summer. Nothing better. There again, also like a clear, dark night for a bit of night fishing. That's me all over. Peter McKenna says our mystery machine could be a Hyundai HW160A. Close, but no cigar. Dan Cullen reckons it could be a Heng Wang wheeled excavator. It's not. Chris Ford going for the JCB-JS 200W. It's not one of those either. Peter McKenna is going in the wrong direction. And unfortunately, he went in the wrong direction for too long because somebody has stolen in and got the right answer. So you can see that Peter McKenna is very, very close with the Hyundai. He was close again there, and he was close again there. Chris Ford, the JCB Hydrodig, it's not one of those as well. Dan Cullen, it's not a Heng Wang 8-ton 360 wheeled excavator. It is, in fact, Dan Cullen's last guess. It is the Hyundai HW100A, and I can prove it to you in just a second. There you are, HW100A. Dan Cullen. Back, well, no, he didn't leave the top of the leaderboard actually, but he's extended his lead. Well done, Dan. Congratulations on that. Good work, that man. Thank you very much indeed for taking part. Peter McKenna, well done, Mandangle, he says. Is that an official nickname? Did we agree on that? I'm not entirely sure. Right, okay, I am going to come back to all of that in just a moment, but going back to Jim Turner. Because not only is he covering questions from today, he's covering questions from yesterday as well. Question of the day, are you a morning person or are you a night owl? He says both, just as happy starting early or finishing late. I can sleep on a washing line. Me too. So I can catch a nod at any time I need it. I was busy loading wagons yesterday, so I didn't have time to answer. But my song, yes, our song yesterday, we were talking about what would be your theme tune. And he is going for Titanium by Sia and David Guetta. Do you know, if anybody actually asked me, I would swear to them that I didn't like any music that had come under the influence of David Guetta. But put David Guetta on the radio, then I'm tapping my feet like a good one. Not my cup of tea at all, but he does have a way with a tune, doesn't he? Let's have a look. My mouse has just decided to stop working. Peter McKenna says, I led you down the right path, Dan. Yeah. Dan is one of those people. We were talking about this while we were in Las Vegas. The number of times that my wife would be working away on one of the slot machines. Win a bit, lose a bit, win a bit, lose a bit. And then she'd walk away and somebody would come in straight after. If anybody knows the series Friends, you will know that those people are called lurkers. And Dan is a lurker. People come up with almost the right answer on our mystery machine, and Dan swoops in at the last minute and says, yeah, it's one of those, and goes away with the prize. Well done, Dan. Let's have a look. When I was a kid, I used to sleep on my dad's dashboard in his old Atkinson Borderer. I can now sleep anywhere. I went to pick my wife up last night. I'm sure I've mentioned this. She works as a receptionist for a slimming school. Not a slimming school, a swimming school. Swimming school. I went to pick her up last night. She was about 5 minutes late. When she arrived, I was fast asleep at the wheel. The engine was off. I was parked, handbrake on, fast asleep. Who's David Guetta? I promise you, go look up David Guetta on iTunes or on YouTube. Trust me, you've heard David Guetta. You really have. Question of the day. Dan Kahn says, I'm a morning man, 4:35 a.m. still, even if I get to bed at 11 a.m. Yeah, it is programming, isn't it? I mean, we mentioned this yesterday, and I'll be mentioning it again in the fullness of time. Even if you've got time off, even if you've got a holiday, even if you're temporarily redundant, the alarm in your head still goes off, doesn't it? It really does. Right, okay, we're going to be back with some more big machines in just a moment.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Las Vegas and Rome are two places where I tend to walk around like this. Normally, I mean, with Rome, all of that history, and nobody seems to take any notice of it when I find it absolutely astonishing. And Las Vegas, they've got volcanoes outside the hotels. They've got pirate ships outside the hotels. They've got water fountains firing water up 100 meters up into the air. It's a crazy place. But I also found myself doing all of that inside as well. And I'm about to show you precisely why. I've got to dredge this off of my hard drive. So bear with me for 1 second while I do so. It's just want to make sure I get the right one. Let's have a look. It's this one. Bear with me. Yeah, we've got a bit more of that tomorrow. We've got a really good time lapse. I do want to go back to Instagram, though, to our friend, a new friend, actually, Tanner Brown, says, when it comes to equipment, when will all these sad politicians leave construction and farming equipment alone as far as emissions? And he's talking not just his country, but that of the UK as well. It's the way we go. It's the way we go. Let's have a look. Jim Turner, tune needs a big drop, though. I could have fallen over if you'd have liked. You on screen. Yeah. You know that bit where I was laughing at the end? There's a story to that. So Fred asked me to walk past a tyre. It was a big Caterpillar wheel loader. Walk past the tyre just to show the scale. And I got halfway past it and then just did one of those. Made me laugh. It made him angry. I don't know why, but it did. And you know those bits where the camera was following me both, or I was kind of following the camera and then the camera was following me? That's the new drone. That's the new drone. Awesome. Now that is a show I'd love to go to. Before I kick the bucket, you got, 3 years to wait until you get another chance? So start saving, my friend. Jim Turner says, I love Rome. The whole place is like a massive museum. Absolutely fantastic. Many, many moons ago. Many moons ago, I went to Rome, and I was basically going there to photograph and film some Caterpillar wheel loaders working in a marble quarry just on the outskirts of Rome. But I ended up with the best part of a day to myself. And I looked at open top buses and that kind of thing, and none of them seemed to do the things that I wanted to do. So I said, sorry, I'll just pop down to the local scooter hire. Now, I realise with the hindsight, very, very stupid thing to do because, Rome is chaotic. But I hired myself a little Vespa and I went off. And yeah, I did, the usual highlights. But what I found most remarkable about Rome was, you get to see as I say, the highlights, Trevi Fountain and all that kind of thing. But then you think, do you know what? I fancy myself a gelato. I'm just going to go down this little side turning here. And down that side turning, there's a statue that's been stood there for the last 3,000 years and nobody gives a toss. It's really like that. We need to test that drone to see if it will track a machine. Right. It has the ability, but in order to do that properly, you need the control. I've gone without the control because, frankly, I don't want to learn to be a drone pilot. I want it to follow me. It's basically for vlogging type stuff. So it's going to be going up to JCB with me in a couple of weeks' time, and it's also going to be going to Eskilstuna up in Sweden when I go to Volvo in November. So that's kind of my plan for it. However, with the control, you can actually lock it on a thing and it will track the machine. If you are in the machine and you launch it from your hand without the control, so long as it can keep you in view, which it's pretty good at doing, it will track you and the machine. And you can set the distance so you get everything in the frame. So just to fill you in on that. Chris Ford says, David Guetta, 26.9 more followers. I'm guessing that's 26.9 million more followers than I've got. The only followers I've got, I'm trying to avoid. Still not familiar with his music. Must get out more. I would say David Guetta music is a bit of an acquired taste, but once you acquire it, it's a bit of an earworm. It does tend to stick with you. So go check it out. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And apparently Titanium is the way to look, is the one to listen to, according to our friend Jim Turner, who knows about these things. His nickname is Not Tunes for Nothing. I'll be back right after this. Now, just to our friend Tanner Brown over in the mighty US of A, and I don't know where in the USA you are, but just to you know all that John Deere equipment that you have at your disposal over in the US. Did you know, Tanner Brown, 1282, that we can't get that here? Here in the UK, we just admire John Deere from afar, and we're about to do it again.
I love Operations Center. It's part of my daily routine. I use it every morning before the guys get here. That's one reason I get here a little bit early, to see how many hours it was put on the machines. If the machine is sitting there idling or running high or running low, say many gallons of fuel per hour, or if a code comes up on the machine, it's another valuable tool that John Deere's got that we really like. This machine here has got an alert. You go to alerts, and then if it's got any alerts, the little dot will show up, and it will send the alerts here.
If you're trying to tweak, fine-tune operations, it's a great tool to look at. We look at it for our haul trucks. We recently just used it to look at fuel consumption. We were noticing some high consumptions during certain parts of the day, and so we were able to kind of dial in on that. We figured out we've got an incline that's too steep, and so we're going to be able to modify that. We're working now to modify that incline.
We're very data-driven. In order to be data-driven, you have to have accurate data. Using the Operations Center allows us to collect accurate data and then make very educated decisions moving forward. Without that technology, we would just be flying blind.
Yeah, we are getting here, and the 950 is showing an alert. Let's check on let's see what it's showing. It is EGR valve position and fault, active exhaust filter. Let's call Alan and see when he can get out to solve our problem.
Cool, you want me to call him?
Sure, if you don't mind.
Prior to the availability of Operations Center to me, I could not track the things I can now. It took a lot of research, a lot of data collection you had to do for a long period of time. And it was very time consuming. And right now you can log in and have that data right in front of you. You can see it in the moment. So you don't even have to wait till the end of the day. You can see what that equipment is doing right now.
Now, here's the thing, okay? Dan Cullen, I'm in complete agreement. Looks a lovely ADT and great kit. Yes, us here in the UK, we admire John Deere from afar. However, our friend Tanner Brown, who, as it transpires, is in the Lone Star state of Texas, he says, sadly, John Deere has taken a mighty fall in the last couple of years as far as quality is concerned. Honestly, I like Volvo now. There you are. Well, I think you always want what you can't have. Turns out maybe we don't want it after all. Interesting point. Even changing inclines to lower fuel consumption. It's what it's all about. When it is your biggest cost, you've got to find ways to reduce fuel consumption, whatever that might be. We do have one more film to show you, and I'll be right back with that in just a moment.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
Ken Hatcher never fails to mention Gold Rush, possibly his favourite TV show. Gold Rush love their Volvo and their cat. Still never seen an episode. I must get round to it. Now, he just mentioned cat. The next video is about Caterpillar, but something just went wrong on my screen. I can't remember what it's about. It's got Caterpillar in it. Who cares?
CAT Hydraulic Excavator Life Extension Solution restores the life of components to its original performance levels with economic rebuild and repair options. A life extension solution will maximize your initial investment and should take place once the machine has accumulated a substantial number of operating hours. Consider early indicators such as service history, CAT SOS services, fuel consumption, and performance loss. So how does it work? First, your local CAT dealer will perform a complete hydraulic inspection of your machine. This will also include an SOS oil sample from your engine and hydraulic circuits, as well as a hydraulic performance test. Based on the results of these inspections, the dealer can advise several economical solutions that can be customized to meet your machine's rebuild and repair needs as well as your budget. If desired, a life extension solution can include individual certified component rebuilds. For example, the engine and cooling system, main hydraulic pump, or the final drives. When opting for certified rebuild, you will also benefit from engineering updates on those major components. If your machine needs a replacement engine and hydraulic pump, you'll need to replace the output hydraulic lines, from the main hydraulic pump to the valve block, and ensure the hydraulic system cleanliness meets the ISO specification. If advised by your CAT dealer, all other machine components will be inspected for reuse as well, including hydraulic cylinders, hydraulic motors, hydraulic accumulators, hydraulic lines, hydraulic hoses, swing drive, final drives, and more. You can even add optional upgrades to enhance your machine related to performance, productivity, technology, comfort, and convenience. During final assembly of the rebuild, your machine will undergo rigorous performance testing and pressure checks. CAT equipment is built to be rebuilt, so you can maximize your investment by extending the life of your hydraulic excavator. Ask your dealer about equipment protection plans, customer value agreements, as well as a range of financing options. Contact your local CAT dealer to find out more about CAT Hydraulic Excavator Life Extension Solutions.
Life extension solutions. They've discovered the secret to eternal life. Almost. I'm going to go back to Peter McKenna says, wow, volume up and down on your show again today. Not entirely sure why that is. Everything's been equalised. No idea what's going on there. Chris Ford, going back to David Guetta, whatever his name is, poor man's Avicii. I actually thought Avicii was more the poor man's David Guetta, but yeah, maybe. Mick Norton says, if the Iranians close the Straits of Hormuz, there'll be an overnight acceptance of CAT concept on the equipment and component renewal. Could well be. Jim Turner says, I'd like Gold Rush, but there always seems so much shouting and showing you what's coming up and what's already been seen. So not enough genuine content to keep my attention. It's filled in a very typical American way, a way I don't like, which is a shame as the subject is perfect viewing for me. He says, Dan Cullen is on his way out the door, having already snatched victory in the Mystery Machine. Volume 20 when you're talking, volume 10 when there's video playing. Weird. And then Dan Cullen says, volume is okay here. Maybe it's a channel thing. Maybe where are you, Peter? You're on Facebook. I wonder if that's a problem over on YouTube. I'll check out a bit later on. But more importantly, Tanner Brown, who has become a very vocal member of the audience, he says, honest question now that someone is willing to talk about it. I think that someone is me. Do you see a true future in diesel electric equipment, not only for demolition, but for general construction? Now, let's be clear. Diesel electric. How are you terming diesel electric? Are you talking about electric machines running off of a diesel generator, in which case, ultimately, I think that's a terrible idea. But if you're talking about just general switching from diesel to electric, my personal belief is we will not have a choice. There will come a time either driven by legislation, certainly here in the UK, we've already got moves afoot for that. We have, over here in the UK, just to fill you in, we have these ultra low emission zones. Excuse me. We have ultra low emission zones, centre of London being one of them, where effectively any vehicles, so cars, trucks, they must be ultra low emission. And those regulations have got tighter and tighter and tighter as we've gone along. Sooner or later, the regulations, I think, will insist we either go electric or at least partly electric. Obviously, we have the promise of hydrogen fuel in the future, but, I'm just back from Las Vegas and the Minexpo show. The mining industry, for various reasons, not least of all money, the mining industry has decided we're going electric, regardless of regulations, regardless of practicality, we are going electric. And I think there will come a time when general construction and demolition will have no choice but to follow suit. It won't be soon, I think we're still ironing out the bugs. Well, certainly ironing out the bugs in terms of hydrogen infrastructure. I don't think we've fully figured out battery technology yet. I don't think we've fully figured out charging infrastructure yet. The fact that we've yet to come up with a machine that will do an entire day without needing a midday recharge, that's going to be a stumbling block. But as somebody that wields one of these all the time, the battery on that used to be terrible. It's really good now. Yes, electric will be a thing. I have no question about it whatsoever. Jim Turner says the Hudic T-Gon seems to be a good answer to diesel electric, then bringing more electric as the tech gets better. Good point. Little question for all you machine owners out there, says Mick. What do you think is an acceptable time span for a machine before it needs an overhaul? Remembering you already spent, say, 300 grand on it. I think increasingly that's not really down to personal preference, although if anybody's got a personal preference, I'd love to hear about it. I think machines are built, I'm sure this is something that Jim Turner will have something to say about. I think machines back in the day, the old Cat machines, the old Komatsu machines, so on down the line, I think they were built for a lifetime, and not just a lifetime of the machine. They were built for a lifetime possibly of an operator or a company. I think machines are built with what's the word? I can't think of the word. You know the word. Obsolescence. They are built for obsolescence. I think things like the CAT rebuild system or the extended life that they're talking about, where you strip down a machine and possibly put new tech on board when you're rebuilding it, I think that will change things. But I think a lot of this is now driven not by personal feeling, not by the gut feel of an engineer wielding a spanner. It's driven by an algorithm. Something within that system will say, enough. And now is the time to get rid. Dan Cullen says full electric is not fully feasible, and see where crane and haulers are complaining about AdBlue and the extensive costs is putting in their companies, and their breakdowns are more than before. Funnily enough, I did see there's been an update on all things related to AdBlue. I am going to dig it out. I saw it last night. I put it to one side. I'm going to dig it out. I'll be bringing that to you probably tomorrow. So please keep an eye out for that. Komatsu seemed to have the answer with a full charge being gained in just 20 minutes charging. Okay. Cat have catered for us seniors, says Mick Norton. Yeah, they certainly did. Mick, depends on usage and how much wear and tear it gets. Usually I would say 8 to 12,000 hours, says Dan Cohen. Tanner Brown says, as far as overhaul, 3,000 hours for new machines in my option before something goes wrong. Old machines, 1995 and older. I've run some for 8,000 without issue. Yeah, and listen, we seem to go through a thing with cars. Do you remember that? There was a time when cars would get to a certain age and bits would start to fall off and they'd go wrong. And then you got, because technology improved and everything else. I mean, for example, do you remember, I don't remember ever actually doing it myself, but I'm sure people will have done in the audience, where you had to run a car in. You couldn't go sort of 70 miles an hour on a motorway when you first got it. You had to run it in and get the engine loosened up and everything else. Do you remember that? Well, we went through from that to a point where you'd get maybe a Mercedes car and it had 100,000 miles on the clock, and that was barely run in. The thing was just coming into its stride. And then we seem to have gone more technological, where you get to a certain age and machines, they start to get sensor problems and electrical problems. Machines are the same. Well, I think we had like a window of optimum utilization, and we seem to have gone from old, rugged, but ultimately unreliable, to technological, very reliable, to even more technological, less reliable. Anybody else got that feeling? Is that just me? Might be just me. I am going to roll the end of show stinger in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. Tanner Brown says, almost like the machines have emotional issues. I've had cars that have had emotional issues, so I think you're absolutely right. If you can't stick around, please stay safe, look after yourself, your family, friends, and your colleagues, and I hope to see you again very soon. God, I did that quickly. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I will be back to talk all things COVID in just a moment. It seems like a lifetime ago, but do you remember the COVID-19 pandemic? The masks, the social distancing, the baking? With the benefit of hindsight, it now seems that while the majority endured the pandemic and the resulting lockdown, some exploited it instead. And as you will hear, it is all of us that will ultimately foot the bill. We already know that while we kept in touch with relatives via Zoom, Boris Johnson and his cronies held parties at 10 Downing Street. We know also that while we clapped for NHS workers, others were consulting to profit from cheap and unusable PPE for nurses and doctors. And we know that while for many of us it was a time of sharing and of helping out those less fortunate or able, others saw it as an opportunity to hoard and to profiteer. Sadly, it transpires that many here in the field of demolition and construction chose to exploit the situation for personal gain. Despite being granted key worker status, the COVID lockdown made life tough for construction workers. Ours is not an industry that can social distance easily. So, despite warnings to the contrary for the rest of the country, demolition and construction workers continue to travel, continue to work, and continue to keep the wheels of the economy turning. But even as they did so, some were rubbing their hands together and eyeing a personal financial gain. It all goes back to those loans, those lifelines we thought that were thrown to us during the chaos of COVID. The bounce back loans, the coronavirus business interruption loan, or CBILS as it became known. They were supposed to keep construction firms afloat, and they did for a while. For many demolition and construction companies, those loans were just what they needed to keep going, to pay our workers, cover the rental on equipment, and to ride out the storm. Feels like the industry now is being drowned. Let me do that again. But now it feels like the industry is drowned. One more time. But now it feels like the industry is being drowned by that very same lifeline. Nearly 40,000 construction companies in the UK have defaulted on their COVID loans. That's a roughly 15% of the entire industry. And let's not forget what government-backed loans actually means. It actually means public-backed. Yes, us, the British public, will ultimately foot the bill either through increased taxation or through cuts in public services to make up the shortfall. Even with all that government backing, £7.68 billion worth of loans handed out across the sector, we're still seeing companies crumble. Winter's coming again, and there's a cold, hard reality settling in across the country, and it feels like debts are hardening just as much as the ground does in December. 34 firms went into insolvency in November alone, the worst month in over 2 years. The sad part, no one's really surprised. It's almost like we've come to expect it. Just like we became attuned to multiple deaths during COVID, we have become attuned to multiple construction company failures each month. This is the new normal. Every day feels like we're just waiting for the next domino to fall. The cost of everything keeps going up, interest rates remain high, and any loans or credit facilities we could potentially access are just more expensive to repay, if you can get a loan at all. That's the bitter irony. Before COVID, banks didn't want to touch construction companies with a 10-foot pole. We were considered too risky. It was only the government guarantees that made them lend to us during the pandemic. But now, the industry is stuck paying back those same loans and being crushed by them, and there's no safety net anymore. For so many companies, it's simply too much. The loans, the back payments, the increased cost of everything, it's unsustainable. And then there's the fraud. Hundreds and possibly thousands of directors who took out loans for companies that weren't even trading or inflated their earnings to get bigger loans than they should have. But here's the thing. Fraud or no fraud, those loans weren't enough to save most. Sure, some people abused the system, but even the ones who didn't are going under. We needed more than a quick fix. We needed long-term support, a real strategy to help us survive over the pandemic once it was over. Instead, we were handed a ticking time bomb of debt, and that bomb, frankly, is now exploding. It's a strange feeling watching the industry starting to implode. You look around and realise that COVID loan schemes and the inability or refusal to pay them back cast a light upon a deeper problem within the UK demolition and construction industry. Margins remain wafer thin and costs fluctuate wildly, often for no good reason. The industry is trapped in a cycle of inexorable decline. Contractors find themselves tied into fixed cost contracts that bleed them dry and from which they cannot escape. By propping up failing companies during the COVID pandemic, we were merely delaying the inevitable. And this isn't just about businesses failing. It's about people losing their jobs, their homes, their sense of security. It's about communities being hollowed out. Every job lost isn't just a number. It's someone who's going to struggle to put food on the table this winter. And what's worse is that for many, the decisions to make those loans felt like a no-brainer at the time. They had to take them. Without them, businesses would have gone under during the lockdowns. But now, to many, it feels like those loans were a trap. Companies took them to survive, but never really recovered. And now they're drowning in debt that they can't repay. And the government are cracking down hard, issuing bans and arrests for fraud. But with the benefit of hindsight, were their checks and balances sufficiently robust? The collapse of ISG, the UK's sixth biggest contractor, should serve as a warning. Their demise wasn't caused by a COVID or by a failure to pay back COVID loans. Their problems ran much deeper than that. But those problems are not peculiar to ISG. They're widespread, endemic. And if a company the size of ISG can collapse and fail, what hope is there for the countless small companies that make up the lion's share of the UK construction industry? Many, I fear, are living on borrowed time. And for them, it's going to be a long, hard winter. There's my thought for the day. What do we have in the chat? Just one comment. Good Lord. No, there wasn't just one comment. My system failed to count. Let's have a look. Peter McKenna says, 30 years ago, there was a special forklift built at our local brewery that could lift a 40-ton Arctic trailer in just 2 passes. Once every 3 months, it stood down waiting for techs to come and service it. Same time every month. We used to put machine on full throttle flat out to pick up any problems with it. Not entirely sure that's advised in the operator's manual, but Mick says, just got a copy of Boris's book, had a quick glance through it. He is one smug bastard who's trying to turn around all he's done. Cannot wait to sit down and read it all. I know I don't like him. He was a snide. Yes, he was most definitely a snide. Now, I'm fairly sure I saw a longer comment going through. Tanner Brown says, glad to have to sign off. Been up for 22 hours. I'm reaching my limit now. I'm not in the heat in Texas. Wish all of y'all the best and be safe today. Thank you very much indeed, Dana Brown. My apologies that this show goes out at a time that is deeply, deeply inconvenient, but really appreciated your company today. And also your comment on John Deere. Set me thinking, that has. I think it's very easy to admire brands from afar when you can't get your hands on them. And then perhaps we might get our hands on them and think, why were we so excited? Yeah. Yes. So just to round things out, for those of you that didn't pitch up for the very opening of the show, we started 12 minutes early today. Basically, we are, if there is enough news to make us do it, then we are going to do a news bit at the beginning of the show. So if you are around a little bit early, please turn up, have a listen, and we can have a chat about it afterwards. If you missed it, don't worry. You can watch it over on YouTube. That YouTube video is up and available right now. Dan Cullen says, what about those companies that went under owing millions? How the fudge do they do it and get away with it? Because they can. The one thing I would say, though, which is kind of puts a slightly different spin on it, there has been something of a trend for companies to basically put themselves into voluntary liquidation to avoid paying back fines, to avoid being prosecuted for accidents and fatalities. But the government is now capable or is able to basically bring them back out of liquidation and make them pay up. So even those that have folded and have decided not to pay back their COVID loans, it ain't over till the fat lady sings, and the fat lady has plenty to sing about. So watch this space. Peter McKenna says, all MPs are smug bastards and none are in touch with reality. They're really not. They're really not. Come the glorious revolution. Dan Cullen, where is the government to help subbing people affected by these issues? the problem is, and I mentioned that anyway, but British Construction Equipment just joined us over on Instagram. Good morning, British Construction Equipment. One of the things that is a concern with all of this, we've already seen Sir Keir Starmer, setting aside what is he known as, free gear or something like that. Never mind all that. But we've already seen the fact that they are thinking, the Labour government are thinking long and hard about some of the spending that they're doing, which will impact all of us. If they cut spending on schools, hospitals, roads, bridges, railways, whatever it might be, that will impact all of us. But let's not forget the reason they're doing that. The Tory government basically decimated the UK economy. But in addition to that, obviously post-COVID, I wonder, and I realise, no politicians, no economists, none of us were prepared for a global pandemic. There was no rule book to work by, and we were all making it up as we go along. But we seem to have gone into things like the bounce back loan and the C-bills loans as well, thinking that once the pandemic was over, everything in the garden would be rosy. We would come out of a pandemic and immediately go into a boom period where the 50,000 quid that we'd borrowed on a bounce back loan, there's stuff down the back of the sofa. Have your money back, have a bit of interest to go with it. Not a problem at all. I think that was naive from a governmental point of view, and clearly I think we can now see that perhaps their checks and balances weren't as robust as they should have been. But what about the industry? If you've got 2 years of doing nothing at all, or virtually nothing, did we really expect everything to just come back and reward us? I think we were naive. I think as a nation, as an industry, I think we were very naive. Peter McKenna says companies go bust and start up again under different management companies. They do, but there is a way to bring them back and make them face the consequences. Mick says, I did mention this last year, mate and his wife work for HMRC. They're part of the department going through all the loans, large and small, cannot remember the figure, but a load got done last year, admittedly small loans, but the big fish are on the line. Yeah, I think the 40,000 defaulted number that we mentioned earlier was on the bounce back loan. There was much, much less defaulting on the C-bills, but the C-bills were much, much bigger loans. I think the C-bills went up to 5 million quid for some of the bigger construction companies. So there's still a long way to go on this. Chris Ford says, nobody said being in business would be easy. Mein Kampf has been 40 years of fun, misery and despair, not in equal amounts. The big fish are always on the line, but historically there's always been a backdoor to walk out of. It's the small fry that are the easiest to reel in. Yeah, I'm bearing in mind, I mentioned in that spiel about ISG, sixth biggest contractor in the country. They've just gone. It wasn't down to COVID. There's mismanagement and misappropriation. That's wrong. It's not misappropriation. It was misrepresentation is the word I was looking for. The company's about to be bought. The company's folded. All of which was awful. But the real impact of that is not going to be with ISG. The directors will pop up somewhere else. In all things being equal, in all likelihood, the people that worked at ISG will also bounce back in some way or another. I know some of their apprentices are already finding alternative employment. The real problem is going to be the subcontractors. Because the further you go down that supply chain and the further you go down the industry food chain, the smaller and smaller the companies become. And ISG might have had, a couple of 100 million quid in the bank to, fall back upon and to see them through hard times. If you're a mom and pop store, as they say in America, you haven't got that. And if you've been kept waiting and ultimately don't get paid by ISG or Buckingham Group or whatever it might be, you're knackered, basically. The problem with borrowing money is you have to pay it back. Indeed it is. Dan Cullen says, change of plan, too wet now, it's home time. It absolutely lashed down last night here in Surrey, and lashed down again first thing this morning as well. Not sure what's happening where you are, people, but yeah, mighty unpleasant weather out there. So I think that will probably do us. If you didn't get to hear the new section of the show, go and have a listen on YouTube. See what you think. Let me know. I know a couple of people have already said they liked it. Assuming there is sufficient news for us to do so, I'll be doing it again tomorrow. Hang on a minute, that's the wrong one. Nearly the whole industry is managed by people that nowadays haven't risen through the ranks. Yeah. Which brings us back. I'm going to take these off because these are really hurting my ears today. Kind of takes us back. I realise this is like a perennial discussion that we have here on the Breakfast Show. The way this industry used to work not that long ago was if you were, if your dad, your uncle, your grandfather worked in demolition or construction, you would accompany them to work on a Saturday. Maybe you'd sweep the yard. Maybe you'd sit in a machine while your dad was doing whatever it was he needed to do. And that gave you your first introduction to the industry. And then maybe when you were a little bit older and nobody was looking, your dad would give you the keys to a machine and you'd slew a machine a couple of times, or you'd run it back and forth and you'd get a feel for the machine. And then once you had a feel for the machine, maybe you'd start driving a bit more regularly. Maybe that was your starting point in the industry. So by the time you left school or college or university, you may have had possibly a decade of being in and around construction or demolition. You'd have got your hands dirty. You'll have got the feel for machines and what they're capable of and what they're not capable of. You'd have got to know the people. You'd have got to have known the system. So when you actually started work on an actual paid basis, you already had a grounding. So you understood most aspects of the job that you were going into. And you could apply that in your career progression. You might still only start sweeping the yard, but you knew how the business worked. And you would learn from those alongside you. And gradually, you would rise through the ranks. Now, there is, as Jim Turner has said, there is this system whereby, for one thing, you can't go and jump on a machine at 7, 8, 9 years old because the health and safety executive will prosecute your parents for it. And the second thing is we now have a system whereby employers are insisting that their employees arrive with a degree tucked under their arm. As a result of having a degree tucked under their arm, they arrive not at the bottom and work their way up the ladder. They arrive halfway up the ladder, bypassing a lot of the people that actually know the job way, way, way better than they do. And that's a problem. And it's a problem that will bite us on the arse, I promise you here. Bloody weather here and forecast, totally BS, says Dan. And they haven't had enough experience to manage jobs, firms, and make a profit. I wonder if there is a correlation between that. I wonder if our insistence on academic ability and knowledge has coincided with an increase in company failures. I wonder. I don't know how I would check that, but I wonder. Got our best work done at the weekend. There was no one about. Yeah, absolutely right. They can't give near accurate information. It's all over the place. Have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe, Pedro. I'll give you a shout in a while. Dan says, are you busy, Mark? Must chat with you on your view of something I have in mind. Dan, I've got Zooms back-to-back today. Tomorrow will be a better idea, I would say. Jim Turner says, my lad is an apprentice plant operator. I knew he'd be all right because he'd already done plenty before he'd even left school. Yeah. But Jim, I mean, we had this discussion just a few weeks ago about the farmer that had been prosecuted for taking his grandson for a spin in a tractor. What you've done, let me be absolutely clear here, what you have done is 100,000% right. You've set your son up, you've given him a flavor, you've given him an inspiration, and you've given him a path. It's also 100% illegal. How does that make any sense? How does that make any sense? Mick says, a few on here have said there is no pride or real interest now. If you've been to uni, you're a good bet. As for experience, oh, well, it doesn't count. Indeed. And that's how it should be. I agree. Mick Dalton says, father to son mentoring for a career progression is the ideal. That's why the farming community are so ideally suited to construction disciplines. I agree. But let's not forget, I think the guy was 78 years old. 78 years old, filmed on a phone by his next door neighbour, reported to the authorities, and he got prosecuted for taking his grandson for a spin. Now, and I've said this. I actually said this on a podcast I did with a guy over in Canada last week. There's a couple of things there. Not only are you removing the inspirational aspect of that, a kid, I don't know how old the kid was, but a kid riding along with his grandfather, seeing how a tractor operates, getting a feel for the power of the machine and how it turns and how it sounds, how it smells, and all that kind of thing. All of that is fantastic, and I think the HSE were wildly misguided in prosecuting the guy, because I actually think what he was doing was perfectly sensible. And I also think nobody is going to take better care of a grandchild than a grandfather. Not the HSE, not a nosy next door neighbour, but the grandfather. But there's another point, and this is the point I made on this podcast. I didn't learn to swim until I was 15 years old, but I'd been fishing with my dad in, canals, lakes, fast-flowing rivers since the age of about 2. My dad always took good care of me. I didn't fall in, I didn't drown, everything was okay. Now, okay, you might say that there was a risk there, but, it never happened. But the point is this. I don't remember much in the way of advice that my dad gave me. There's bits, but not much. Because my dad was on shift work, he didn't do much in the way of parents' evenings and coming to watch me play football. He didn't do any of that. So those moments that I spent fishing with my dad were the bond that bound us together. And I'm sure that's exactly the same with this 78-year-old farmer and his grandson. And I'm sure that's the same with Mick, with Jim and his son, and with countless others. It's not just a case of this is how the thing works. I've got 4 kids and I've got a wife. I've been to Glastonbury Festival a couple of times with my youngest daughter. And in terms of parenting, it's probably a highlight because she was the eldest twin, but she was, one of 4. By and large, I have always dealt with 4 children, and they're all, back in the day, they were all clamoring for your attention. So she got at best a quarter of my attention. But when she was 14 years old and when she was 15 years old, for a period of about a week, she got my full and undivided attention. Much the same as I did. I've got a younger sister. I had to share the attention of my parents with my sister. But when I was fishing, it was just me and my dad. There was no sharing. It was completely and totally focused on each other. And I think we do away with that, legally or otherwise, at our peril. Gary Muirhead, we've been going for 1 hour and 17 minutes, and Gary has just pitched up. I fully understand, Gary. Your question of the day went down very well. Thank you very much indeed. Hope you're fitting well, my friend. Chris Ford says, one day, son, all this debt will be yours. That seems to be the way it's going. Jim Turner says, kids go to scouts and guides, etc. So why not have a youth group for practical... Let me do this. Once again, kids go to scouts and guides, etc. So why not have a youth group for practical kids that want to learn skills? They could work on worthy causes, helping the community, getting a trade at the same time. What a fantastic idea. And I never did scouts. I never did guides. Well, obviously never did guides. I didn't do scouts and I didn't do boys brigade or any of those things because I was too busy playing football. And I'm not a particularly practical person. So what Jim is suggesting wouldn't have suited me at all. But some of my mates who went on to be sort of car mechanics and stuff like that, or worked in construction, it would have suited them down to the ground. And as I say, I've had none of my children went to guides or scouts either. So I don't know what they look like now. But is it all still about tying knots and helping old ladies across the road? If it's about tying knots, is it? I don't know. But if it is, should we not update that and give them some sort of practical knowledge, as Jim has said? Same, you see videos of farming women having their kids in the tractor and they're loving it too. Yeah, I'm sure they are. Mick says, good idea, Jim, but think the amount of kids of health. Think about the amount of health and safety involved doesn't give any incentive for people to put themselves out to do it. You're right. Dan says, I can't swim, but I've worked on trawling vessels for 10 years, 200 to 400 miles from land. Just stay on board is the answer. Mick says, I think the old age is catching up. My spelling getting suspect lately. My speech is getting suspect lately as well. Let's have a look. Our friend Wolfie is back with us. Good morning to you, sir, all the way from the US of A. Our second guest from the US of A today. Mick says, Dan, hate to think if my insurance people found out I can't swim, my boat would be laid up for good. Sorry, but the break time is now 11 a.m. and the Wi-Fi is pants. The dog's teeth are working well today. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I really wanted today's COVID-related morning monologue to be serious and well delivered, instead of which it was an absolute shitstorm. I do apologise. Mick says, my late father worked alongside my grandfather in the South Wales coalfields just after World War I. He was aged 14 at the time and maintained a fierce work ethic as a miner, dockyard labourer and foundryman, which stayed with him until he retired. Yeah, even things like that. I think you can, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, people. Please take this as it's meant. You could, with the right amount of patience, you could probably teach a monkey to operate an excavator. Not well, not safely, not productively, but you could train a monkey to do it. You could take a kid of 14, 15, 16 years old, show them the levers, and after a while, particularly if they've spent some time on gaming consoles, they would get the gist. What you can't teach via simulator, via PlayStation, is that thing of work ethic and working as part of a team. That needs to be shown. You can't just explain it. It needs to be shown. Dan Cullen says, when can we get a meet up with Mick Saunders and yourself, Mark? Listen, if there's pie and mash involved, I will find a way. Gary Muirhead says, is there an industry where a son can follow a father into? Not easily. Not easily. I mean, in my part of the industry, it was kind of encouraged because ours was a union closed shop. So in order for me to join the publishing company that I joined, I only got in because my dad was already there. I wonder if that's still allowed. That's probably been rendered illegal, I would imagine, or crushed under the wheels of industry. Peter McKenna says, I learned how to drive a tractor at 11, learned to drive a truck at 12. By 13, I could rope and sheet a full load of paper reels on Dad's truck. Stood you in good stead, no doubt. Gave you a work ethic and so on. Yeah. And Mick says, as long as you eat a double-double anytime you want. I am a double-double man. I have to admit, I do struggle with it now, though. I do. I mean, the pies are always gone. The liquor's always gone. Sometimes there's a bit of mash left behind. But a double-double, all about that. I always say operating a machine is only 20% of the job. And there's a point that gets lost in translation. It's, as I say, you could put somebody on a machine. You could even put somebody completely raw on a machine, stick them in the middle of a field, start the thing up, and just say, figure it out. And you know, after a while, and some it would take longer than others, sooner or later okay, that's the bit that does the boom, that's the bit that does the bucket. Oh, I can dig a hole. They would figure it out. That makes them as prepared. That makes them as prepared for a career in construction as a competence card does. It's everything that goes around that. I'm not going to explain what it is because Jim has already done it. The rest is experience, work ethic, wanting to get something done properly and efficiently, and working as part of a team, and being helpful even. Gary Muirhead, you must be very proud of Fred and your other children to follow you into the industry. I'm really, really happy that Fred has. Not just because it's kind of brought me on a bit. You know, it's made me better at what I do, and it's widened my field of vision. I actually said this when I was in Italy with Stefano Panseri at Despe. I've always quite enjoyed my job, you know, particularly the travel part. You know, you get to go to far-flung locations and see stuff that you wouldn't normally see. But I now have the added bonus of doing that with my son in tow. You know, we got to spend a week together in Las Vegas. You know, what father gets to do that with a near 30-year-old son? Not many. I have to say, it has been an absolute blast. You're taught to pass the test. Learning comes afterwards. Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? And Dan Cullen says, I learned and drove our tractors at 12 to 14 on local roads when Dad used to go to the pub, and I've done a few jobs. Yeah, it's how it worked. It's how it worked. And listen, I don't want children hurt. I don't want children put at risk. But really, my dad tried his hardest to sway me away from becoming an HGV driver. Yeah, I'm so glad I didn't listen to him. It was a great career choice. Yeah. Dan Cullen says, I'd collect him on the way home. See, your father had it pretty well worked out there, didn't he? He pops to the pub, you get the work done, and then pick him up on the way home. This guy sounds like an absolute genius. People, that is more than enough of this. We've been going for nearly an hour and a half. Unfortunately, that is one of the issues with starting the show 10, 12 minutes early. It means it goes for even longer. So for that, I apologise. But we will be back tomorrow. If there is enough new news, I will be doing much the same as we did today, start a little bit early. Gary, you missed it completely, but you can catch up on YouTube. We've got a new bit at the start of the show that talks about news headlines. So rather than sitting there and scrolling through LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube and all of that, if you want a condensed version of what's going on in the UK demolition and construction industry, you can now do so usually by about 10:30 in the morning, I would say, over on YouTube. It's certainly there now. But if you want to see it even earlier, it will be just before 10 o'clock tomorrow. There you are. That's brought you up to date. And I know Gary will have missed this, but I am going to show him just to prove that I am working on it. Gary, that's what a Sight for Sore Eyes number 3 will look like. That's the front cover. The content is all but done. I've got a few bits and pieces to do. I've got to do a bit of editing on it as well, but it's all but done. Mick says, make a date, Dan. Yes, please do so. Just please bear in mind, what is the time now? It's 11:15. It will take me an hour and a bit to get into the centre of London, or to the good bit of London. Probably more like an hour and a half to get over to the east end of London, which frankly is the bit where we should be meeting up, I would say. So let's make a date, but bear in mind, I can't get out of here much before about 11:30. Everybody, go and have a fantastic day, have a productive day, have a safe day. Don't tell the HSE I told you, but take one of your kids for a spin. They'll thank you for it. That's me done. I'll see you tomorrow. All the best.